So, we've learned that students benefit from reading text that is above what we might consider their just right reading level. But that doesn't mean we just throw them into complex text and hope for the best. We scaffold that complex text reading. And done well, scaffolding is what makes the difference between a student who struggles through a text and a student who builds the skills to handle harder text over time. In today's video, I'll share 5 smart strategies for scaffolding complex text reading that you do with the whole group. If you're new here, my name is Anna Geiger. I'm the author of Reach All Readers, host of the Reach All Readers podcast, and creator of the Reach All Readers Plus membership. And my mission is to help K to 3rd grade teachers bridge the gap between what we know from research and what they do in the classroom every day. Before I get into the strategies, I want to let you know that much of what I've learned today is from the reading I've done of 2 books and conversations with their authors. So these are Raising Up Readers by Dr. Jennifer Thronson, as well as Leveled Reading, Leveled Lives with Dr. Tim Shanahan. So strategy number 1 is to establish a clear purpose before you read. That means you know why you're reading this particular text, and your students know too. Students need to know what they're working toward. When you communicate the success criteria, they're more likely to meet the demands of the lesson. So instead of saying, today we're going to read about hurricanes, you might say, our goal for today's lesson is to be able to explain how a hurricane forms. At the end of this lesson, you'll tell a partner what you learned using this diagram as a guide. Now they know what to pay attention to, and they have a reason to stay in the text. Strategy number 2 for scaffolding complex text reading for students is to build or activate prior knowledge. So you really want your students to think carefully about what they already know as it connects to this text topic. Researcher Marilyn Adams has described background knowledge as mental Velcro. If students have some familiarity with the topic, the new ideas have a place to land. If they don't, even a well-written text can feel like nothing but words on a page. So before you read the text with your students, ask yourself, might they have some prior knowledge on this topic? And if not, what do I need to do to get them prepared to read this text? If they do have prior knowledge, you still want to activate it. So you could ask a quick question, show a picture, have a brief conversation. But if the topic is outside of their world, you might need to build some background knowledge with a couple minutes of a YouTube video, some images, an explanation. Even a little goes a long way, so this doesn't need to take very long, but it is important to make this a part of your work that you do before the reading. So there are a few tools that work well for this. Many of us are familiar with a traditional KWL chart, what I know, what I want to know, what I learned. I've actually revised this a little bit and I call it a tell chart. So the first column is what I think I know about this topic. The second is what I expect to learn. So this actually gets students thinking about what might be in the text, maybe making some predictions. The third column is what I learned, and the last one is things I'm left wondering about. So you could prepare this chart and show it to your students before reading and then refer to it during the reading. We don't want to just make activating prior knowledge be something we do before reading. We want to come back to it as we go, especially if what students thought they knew is revised based on what they learned from the text reading. An anticipation guide is something else you can do to activate prior knowledge. You give students a set of statements related to the reading and ask them to mark them as true or false. And then you return to the same statements as you read or after, and students can adjust their answers based on what they've learned, giving text support. So here's an example of an anticipation guide using the hurricane passage from my 3rd grade natural disasters text set. Before reading, students would evaluate each of these statements and determine whether or not they are true or false based on their prior knowledge. So number 1, the center of a hurricane is its most dangerous part. Number 2, hurricanes only cause damage near the coast. Number 3, warm ocean water helps hurricanes grow stronger. Number 4, a storm officially becomes a hurricane when its winds reach 74 miles per hour. And number 5, scientists use a scale of 1 to 10 to measure hurricane strength. Again, during reading and or afterward, students return to that anticipation guide to revise their answers as needed. Strategy number 3 for scaffolding complex text reading with the whole group is to front load with a small group as needed. So you may have students who struggle more than others to work with this complex text. Maybe they are English language learners, maybe they are behind when it comes to fluency and comprehension skills. So what you might want to do is actually pull them separate from the group and work through the text in advance. If the students are going to intervention, you might have the interventionist work with them on building fluency with this particular text before you bring the text to the whole class. So these students are more prepared to tackle it. It also might be true that these students lack the background knowledge that the rest of the class already has. So you could use this front-loading opportunity to spend more time building background knowledge. You might also use that front-loading meeting to do more work with vocabulary. The goal is that when you tackle this text with the class, these students are coming with some familiarity with the text and not starting at zero. Strategy number 4 for scaffolding complex text with the whole class is to use active reading strategies. So what we don't want to do is go back to the old habits of round robin reading, where you go around the room and kids take turns reading, or popcorn reading, which is kind of the same thing except it's a surprise. Either way, students get a tiny amount of time to actually be reading the text. Someone else is doing most of the reading. Also, we don't want to make this a time where the teacher is reading aloud to the students. Now, reading aloud to students is super important, and we want to be doing that at a different part of our day. But remember, the point of this is to help students learn to read complex text. So we want them to be reading it. We want their eyes on the text, so we want them to actively track it with a finger or the end of a pencil, maybe a bookmark. From there, though, you have several options when it comes to actually reading the text. You could do something called close reading, where you read aloud, but you stop often and students fill in the word. So they have to be following along closely to see that word. They're not filling in what would make sense. They're reading the missing word. You could do that for short sections. It's probably better, though, to have strategies like choral reading, where everyone reads the text together with you as the teacher leading the pace. You could also do echo reading, where you read and then students read the section after you. They could echo a couple of sentences or a paragraph. You could also do duet reading, where you pair one stronger reader with one reader who's not as capable, and they read in unison. With partner reading, again, you pair two students, one stronger, one not as strong, and they take turns doing the reading. Finally, strategy number 5 is called stop and process. So we don't just read all the way through the passage without taking a breath. We stop to build in regular points for students to process what they've read. Dr. Thronson recommends stopping about every 5 minutes with younger students to give them time to respond. When you stop, you can do a turn and talk, where you provide a sentence starter for the students. You could do an activity called Get the Gist, which I've talked about before, which is where you work together to talk about what's the most important who or what in this section, and what's the most important thing about the who or what. And then we put that together in a gist statement that's 10 words or fewer. I actually have a whole video on my channel about this questioning that you can do as you read. It's called The Biggest Mistake to Avoid When Teaching Reading Comprehension. And spoiler, the mistake is saving all the questions till the end. So if you want to learn more about how to plan these stopping points and what questions you might ask, I would for sure check out that video. So today we've talked about 5 specific strategies that you can use to scaffold complex text reading. If you want to go deeper on comprehension instruction, I would encourage you to join my Building Comprehension from the Ground Up workshop. In that workshop, we cover what to teach for comprehension beyond strategy of the week. We talk about how to plan and pause those stopping points to build meaning, not just do busy work, and how to make decisions about building background knowledge, teaching vocabulary and syntax without feeling like you have to teach every single thing for every single text. That workshop is for kindergarten through 3rd grade teachers, as well as for teachers who are teaching students above that level who are still struggling as readers. The link to sign up is below this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.